Muharram is the first month of the Islamic calendar, but for many Muslims it is much more than the beginning of a new year. It is a sacred month, a period associated with restraint, reflection, memory, and moral seriousness. Unlike the solar Gregorian calendar, the Islamic calendar follows the moon, so Muharram moves through the seasons over time. Its arrival marks a spiritual turning point rather than a fixed seasonal holiday. For Shia Muslims especially, Muharram is inseparable from the memory of Karbala, a tragedy that shaped religious identity, devotional practice, and ideas about justice. For Sunni Muslims, the month also carries religious meaning, especially through fasting and remembrance on Ashura. To understand Muharram, we need to look at sacred time, early Islamic history, and the different ways Muslims remember the past. The word Muharram comes from an Arabic root connected to prohibition and sanctity. The month is one of the 4 sacred months in Islam, periods traditionally associated with the prohibition of warfare and the protection of peace. This idea existed in Arabia before Islam and was affirmed within the Islamic tradition. Sacred months created protected time, when conflict was to be restrained and society was reminded that not every moment should be treated as ordinary. In this sense, Muharram's name is not simply a label. It points to a moral atmosphere. Certain times are set apart, and human behavior should change in response. That meaning gives the month a solemn character even before we arrive at the later historical events that made it especially important. The most important day within Muharram is the 10th day, known as Ashura. The word Ashura is linked to the number 10, and across Muslim communities it has carried layers of meaning. In Sunni tradition, Ashura is associated with the story of Moses and the Israelites being saved from Pharaoh, a moment of divine deliverance remembered through gratitude and voluntary fasting. In Shia tradition, Ashura is also the day of the Battle of Karbala, when Husayn ibn Ali, the grandson of the Prophet Muhammad, was killed along with many members of his family and companions. These meanings do not erase one another, rather, they show how one date can become a powerful center of memory, worship, grief, and reflection across different Muslim traditions. To understand Karbala, we have to return to the political tensions of the early Muslim community. After the death of the Prophet Muhammad, questions of leadership became deeply significant. Over time, political authority came into the hands of the Umayyad dynasty. Yazid, the son of Muawiyah, became caliph, but not everyone accepted his legitimacy. Husayn ibn Ali, revered as the Prophet's grandson and the third Imam in Shia Islam, refused to give allegiance to Yazid. For Husayn and his supporters, this was not only a political dispute. It was a question of moral authority, religious integrity, and resistance to unjust power. The road to Karbala began with this refusal to treat authority as valid simply because it had military or political force behind it. Husayn traveled with family members and a small group of companions toward Iraq, where some people in Kufa had invited him and expressed support. But the political situation changed rapidly. Umayyad forces intercepted Husayn's caravan and prevented it from reaching its destination. The group was stopped on the plain of Karbala, in present-day Iraq. Cut off, surrounded, and vastly outnumbered, Husayn and his companions faced mounting pressure to submit. Accounts of the event emphasize the hardship of the camp, including thirst, separation from water, and the presence of women and children among Husayn's family. These details became central to later remembrance because they turned Karbala into more than a battlefield. It becomes a scene of vulnerability, loyalty, and conscience under extreme pressure. On the 10th of Muharram in 680 CE, the confrontation ended in violence. Husayn and many of his male relatives and companions were killed. In Shia memory, the killing of Husayn was not an ordinary death in battle, it was the martyrdom of a righteous figure standing against oppression. The tragedy is intensified by Husayn's closeness to the Prophet Muhammad, his position in the Prophet's family, and his status as Imam in Shia belief. Karbala became a defining event because it offered a moral drama that could be retold in every generation, a small group choosing principle over survival, loyalty over compromise, and witness over silence. This is why Ashura is remembered not merely as history, but as a living ethical lesson. For Shia Muslims, the first 10 days of Muharram are a period of mourning, culminating on Ashura. Communities gather in mosques, husainiyas, homes, and public spaces to remember Hussein and the martyrs of Karbala. Speakers recount the events leading to the battle, the suffering of the camp, and the moral choices of Hussein and his companions. These gatherings are not only historical lectures. They are devotional acts that connect grief with religious identity. The story of Karbala is used to reflect on justice, sacrifice, loyalty to the family of the Prophet, and resistance to tyranny. Through repeated remembrance, the past is made present. Participants are invited to ask what they would stand for when comfort, safety, or social pressure pushes them toward silence. Muharram rituals vary across regions and cultures, but several practices are widely associated with Shia commemoration. Elegies and lamentations are recited, often with deep emotion, to express sorrow for Hussein and his companions. Public processions may take place, with participants walking together in a collective display of mourning. In many communities, people distribute food and water as acts of charity, a practice made especially meaningful by the remembered thirst of Hussein's camp at Karbala. Some Shia communities also practice rhythmic chest beating, known as latmiya or sinazani, as a physical expression of grief. The purpose of these practices is not performance for its own sake. They create shared memory, communal solidarity, and a language for mourning that joins body, voice, and belief. Ashura itself is the emotional center of the mourning period. Ceremonies often become more solemn, and the retelling of Karbala reaches its most painful scenes. The names of Hussein, his family members, and his companions are remembered with reverence. For many believers, weeping during these gatherings is not viewed as weakness. It is a sign of love, loyalty, and moral sensitivity. The grief of Ashura carries a message: injustice should not be normalized, and suffering should not be forgotten simply because it happened long ago. In this way, mourning becomes a form of moral education. It teaches that memory can challenge power, that grief can become commitment, and that sacred history can speak directly to the ethical struggles of the present. Sunni Muslims also recognize Muharram and Ashura, though the emphasis is different. In many Sunni traditions, Ashura is connected to the story of Moses, Pharaoh, and the deliverance of the Israelites. The day is often observed with voluntary fasting as an expression of gratitude to God. Some Muslims fast on the 9th and 10th, or the 10th and 11th, to distinguish the practice and extend the devotion. Sunni communities also regard the killing of Hussein as a painful and tragic event in Islamic history. It may be remembered in sermons, lessons, and reflection, even if it is not ritualized in the same way as in Shia communities. This difference shows the diversity of Muslim practice while also revealing shared respect for Hussein's place in Islamic memory. Muharram also invites a broader reflection on how religious communities remember. History is not only preserved in books. It is carried through calendars, gatherings, sermons, poetry, food, tears, fasting, and public ritual. For Shia Muslims, Karbala became a framework for understanding oppression and moral courage. For Sunni Muslims, Ashura remains a day connected to gratitude, prophetic history, and reflection, while Hussein's death is honored as a tragedy. Across these traditions, Muharram reminds believers that sacred time can shape moral imagination. It asks people to slow down and consider what they value. It turns memory into practice, giving charity, restraining the self, mourning the innocent, thanking God for deliverance, and reflecting on the responsibilities that come with faith. So Muharram cannot be reduced to a single meaning. It is the beginning of the Islamic year, one of the sacred months, the setting of Ashura, and for many Muslims the month of Karbala's grief. Its significance differs between Shia and Sunni traditions, but in both cases it is a time that draws attention to faith, memory, and moral responsibility. The story of Hussein at Karbala continues to resonate because it addresses questions that remain urgent. What is justice? When should a person refuse unjust authority? How should communities remember suffering? And how can grief become a force for compassion rather than despair? Muharram endures because it joins history with conscience, making the past a mirror for the present. If you found this helpful, please like this video and subscribe for more explainers.